Okay, I'm gonna see if you can see this. This is the new cottage meeting resource, and welcome to the cottage meeting presentation number 3, Ladies First for Moms for America. And this is the newest manual. If you'd like to get that, that is now in the bookstore. And if you click on momsforamerica.us and you click on the cottage meetings, here's presentation 3, and under resources you can see other things if you didn't want to weren't able to get the manual. It has the article about The Gathering Place by Kimberly Fletcher, all these different things, and even the recommended books and videos on here. So that's a good resource to have. And I'm going to go to my slideshow. If you want to put in your comments under wherever we're going to place this on Rumble or YouTube, or actually right now on Zoom, your email, I can send you the slides of this. The second part of our lesson will be from this book, Forgotten American Stories, Celebrating America's Constitution. And it is written by Lydia Wallace Nuttall. She was on with us last week and explained that the second edition, she's sold out, but she'll be getting new ones, and to pray that they would be able to get them sooner than Christmas if we can. So if we can include that in our prayers, that would be really wonderful. Our first lesson, we talked about Hope for America, that seminar 1, and you can go back and rewatch this video that's embedded in the lesson if you'd like, with Kimberly Fletcher. And then the story, the reason why I'm doing the Forgotten Stories is that I wanted to tell the stories. There's 12 stories that go with it. And the first one was about the virtue of courage in Francis Scott Key and how we got the Star Spangled Banner. And it was an amazing story. And the 4 things to review of lesson or seminar or presentation cottage meeting 1 was look to God, not the government, prioritize family time, study the Constitution from the viewpoint of the founding fathers, and then pray about things and do something, whether it's just starting in your own home or being active at a school board, or but ask the Lord what to do. And I wanted to incorporate some of the 28 principles of liberty that's in the 5,000 Year Leap, which at the top of that book says that, you know, a miracle had occurred, which the heavenly banner is the Constitution. So let's review the 2 for that lesson. And that is, number 1, the only reliable basis for sound government and human relations is natural law. Number 2, a free people cannot survive under a Republican Constitution unless they remain virtuous and morally strong. And then our seminar number 2, or cottage meeting number 2 last week, was No Place Like Home. And we talked about the 3 pillars that are best anchored at home, which were faith, virtue, and patriotism. And you can go get the resources again on that lesson if you didn't have time to listen to Ben Carson's talk. And we also talked, we did the Forgotten American Stories, Constitution, Chapter 2, and studied the Statue of Liberty with the virtue of perseverance and how that came about. And I wanted to just review the symbolism used in the Statue of Liberty. Liberty's 7 spike-like rays emanating from her crown represent heaven's rays shining over the 7 continents and the 7 seas of our world. There's a broken shackle and chains lying at Liberty's feet, which represent freedom from oppression, tyranny, and servitude. The tablet she holds firmly in her left hand represents a book of law. Inscribed on it is the date July 4th, 1776, written in Roman numerals, the date Americans declared independence from Great Britain. Liberty faces southeast to welcome all who enter New York Harbor. She holds her right hand, which is the covenant hand, the torch, which is the symbol of enlightenment. The golden flame of freedom shines as a beacon to the world. So I wanted to remind you about that because we'll be talking about Ellis Island at the end of the lesson today. So we finished the lesson last week by just talking about that virtue of perseverance and liberty. So let's review the next 3 principles of liberty. The most promising method of securing a virtuous and morally stable people is to elect virtuous leaders. 4, without religion, the government of free people cannot be maintained. And 5, all things were created by God. Therefore, upon him, all mankind are equally dependent, and to him, they are equally responsible. So here we are with seminar 3, cottage 3. And we're going to start off with this video that is 19 minutes with Julie Jackson, our education vice president to teach. I'm going to put it on full screen and get this to work. And then we'll discuss and we'll quickly do our story with chapter 3 in the Forgotten American Stories.
Welcome to our third cottage meeting for Moms for America, entitled Ladies First. I am so glad to be with you. I am Julie Jackson with Moms for America, where we believe that liberty begins at home. When mamas know and love the stories and miracles of America, her children and her grandchildren will know and revere them as well. Last time we met, we talked about how it is home where the seeds are sown. There really is no place like home to anchor our children in hope, faith, and patriotism. Today, we're going to discuss Ladies First, lesson number 3. All our lessons are contained in the Cottage Meeting Resource Guide. I would highly recommend reading the lesson outline and supplemental material before you meet each time, so your heart and your mind will be ready and prepared to have an insightful and inspired discussion. I love this lesson today because I have seen firsthand the transformation of myself, my marriage, and how I have taught my children when I began to learn the principles of freedom and liberty and to understand the Constitution and how it was written to protect families and what that means for me as a mother. As I began to learn the great stories and miracles of America and the Constitution, inevitably, I retaught them to my children, which only solidified the morals and the principles within me. You learn best when you have to give it away, to teach, even if you don't feel qualified or prepared. Alex de Tocqueville, that great French writer of Democracy in America, said, "Righteous women in their circle of influence, beginning in the home, can turn the world around." The greatest teaching in the world is done by humble mamas trying to do their best, oftentimes in less than ideal circumstances. Tim Scott, a senator from South Carolina, recently shared a tender story about his mother on national TV. He said as a young boy, his mother divorced his father, so she took him and his brother back to live with her parents, his grandparents. They all had to sleep, Mama and the 2 boys, in one room. He was angry and churned up. It was at this time he began to notice his mother praying every night at her bedside. He said, "She converted me to Christianity through her example, and it changed my life." His family, he said, went from the cotton fields to Congress in one generation because of the prayers of his mother. Mamas, when we fully understand and embrace the powerful influence we have in our homes and on our families, we begin to understand how we can heal our nation. We do it by educating ourselves first, for as the women goes, so goes the nation. Abigail Adams said, "If we mean to have heroes, statesmen, and philosophers, we should have learned women." Mothers, we have a divine and essential role in God's plan for his children on this earth. We were held in reserve as the final and crowning act of the creation. God saved his best creation for last. I like to remind my 3 daughters of that and all women when I get a chance. Your role as a woman and a mother is vital to the human race. Adam called his companion Eve because she was the mother of all living. We bring life and love and hope and purpose and encouragement to so many. Often the work we do goes unnoticed still, but God sees us as we are not invisible to him. As we build up hearts and homes and husbands and children, it might seem like thankless work at times. You are building when no one sees, but trust that God sees. Our work will stand as a monument to God, to our posterity, to freedom and liberty. I want to recommend a wonderful 5.5-minute video entitled Invisible Woman by Nicole Johnson. You can find it at our cottage meeting link under lesson 3 on our website, Moms for America. You might have to just keep your hanky close. I'm just warning you now. She tells of how her friend went to Europe and brought her back a beautiful picture book of cathedrals and inscribed inside, with admiration for the greatness of what you're building when no one sees. She tells us that most of those that worked on these magnificent structures throughout history, their names are unknown. The builders aren't known. Nicole reminds us we are building great cathedrals as well. We might not finish them in our lifetime, but it's okay if not everyone sees or knows, because we don't work for them. We work for Him, God. Our work will stand as a monument to God. The work with our children in our homes and in communities, and for the love of God and country, those things that we do don't go unnoticed. God sees us. We are building a monument to Him. Question: so how does the work that you do seem invisible at times? And how do we know that's not really the case? Let's look at some of the Bible verses and ponder on how God views us, His choice daughters, and the work that we do. In Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31, we are told, "Who can find a virtuous woman? Her price is far above rubies." In Psalms 127, verse 3, "Children are a heritage unto the Lord." In 2 Timothy 1, verses 5 through 7, Timothy's grandmother, Lois, and Eunice, his mother, the Lord says, "The faith in them is the faith in you, Timothy." How does the faith of a mother and a grandmother become the faith of the child and the grandchild? And how does God view women and the raising of children? God loves His daughters. We come as close to divinity on earth as it gets. We are co-partners with God. We are life bearers and givers. We rear and nurture and train and establish within them patterns for life. Our children are His children, whom He's entrusted in our care. I want to recommend a new book, Promises of the Constitution. It contains short 1.5-page vignettes of aspects of history. It's so good. I've read these to my kids for years in our family devotional. They break down subjects and ideas in an easy to understand way. You can find it on our Moms for America online store. And there's also a Promise of the Constitution lesson manual for children and teens to facilitate learning and discussion. One of you could read and lead a discussion on this vignette 13.6. It's on page 292 in the Promises of the Constitution. It talks about Queen Esther and how she was an example of faith and hope and charity. She had been born for a time such as this. Her people were at the crossroads. She knew she had to do something. You know, we actually named our youngest daughter after her, Esther's Hebrew name, Hadassah. Marie Hadassah is our little girl's name, because I felt so strongly as she was growing in utero in my belly that this child was going to be born for a time such as this. And I have reminded her of this often as our little Marie Hadassah is getting ready to turn 14 soon. Mama, your daughters, you are like Queen Esther. You have been saved to come to earth at these perilous times when America is at the crossroads. What will we do to save our family, our people, our nation? It can be as simple as what Dr. Ben Carson's mother did. Remember, we mentioned her in our last lesson, There's No Place Like Home. Instead of watching incessant TV, Mama Carson made those boys go to the library and write reports from 2 books they had to read each week. He said those dramatically changed his life. A whole new world opened up to him through reading and those reports. He went on to not only become a world-renowned neurosurgeon, but also write books and speak eloquently of the blessings of liberty and the greatness of America. He said, "I not only saw and felt the difference my mother made in my life, but I am still living out that difference as a man." I would highly recommend, if you haven't already done so, watch his National Prayer Breakfast speech in Washington, D.C. in 2013. A book has been written about his life story and made into a movie as well called Gifted Hands, which I would recommend. Through the years, some of my kids have done book reports on school from this book, and it's also a great movie to watch with your family. In the supplemental material, there is a wonderful story that Kimberly Fletcher, the founder and president of Moms for America, tells of her ancestral home and community in Cowansville, Pennsylvania, an hour outside of Pittsburgh. The article is entitled "The Gathering Place." Now, let me just pause for a moment from this article. You know, I really liked this story because during the summer of COVID 2020, my husband and children spent a lot of time down on a 50-acre family property in Ladysmith, Virginia, about an hour and a half from Washington, D.C., where we live. This land had been purchased by my husband's great-grandfather 80 years earlier. During that time in our nation's history, it was no small thing for a Black man and his family to do. The ancestral home that stands there today was built on neighboring lands acquired, and through the years came barns and animals and pastures and lakes where we have all met for years for holidays and church homecomings and special occasions. The ancestral home has been a humble gathering place with a tin roof and an old-fashioned lightning rod on the top still. It's where my husband's mama and all of her 5 siblings were born and raised, and where my husband spent his summers. The house inside was renovated a few years ago. So that COVID summer, we put the kids to work outside. They painted the porches and the siding, they chopped wood, planted and weeded a huge garden. They shot guns, they fished at the pond. They took long walks on the dusty roads. We dodged snakes, we pulled out ticks. We cleared the land, we mowed acres of grass. We had country relatives come visit us and we visited them. We had gatherings and family dinners. All the kids loved spending time there that COVID summer, and they felt the pride of what had been built and maintained through the years. As we swung in the hammocks under the big trees in the front yard, we talked about building up the land again, even putting animals that had once been there on it again. Hogs, cows, chickens, horses. My 3 girls decided, though, we didn't want to kill any animals, so it would be an animal sanctuary instead. Dad and the boys, they teased us about that, but it was wonderful being there together, laughing, dreaming, and planning. That summer, we felt the great spirit of the land and the ancestors that had come before us. It helped root our children's identity and love of family in this great country where anything is possible. As Kimberly tells in her article entitled "The Gathering Place" in the supplemental material for this lesson, she had an epiphany about her family's homestead and its legacy in Cowansville, Pennsylvania, one year when she took her kids to visit. When she was a young girl, she would spend every summer there. The town was named after one of her ancestors who purchased the land after the Revolutionary War. It had become a home to all of her aunts and uncles and a virtual army of cousins. The center of it was the family homestead where her great-grandparents lived and the family gathered for those special occasions. And it was affectionately called the Gathering Place, where beautiful memories could bind the family together for generations. She tells of wonderful memories of Grandma's front porch, talking for hours, Uncle George's store, Aunt Helen's house with the orchards and the fruit pies and the jams enjoyed. All the houses were full of activity and people and memories and love. Well, Kimberly married, and her life took her in new directions. She would infrequently make it back to Cowansville through the years, but with her 8 children, she was busy. In 2002, her family was taking a road trip through Pennsylvania. So she decided to take her children to her childhood ancestral home in town. When they pulled into town, her heart ached to see all the change. Grandma Jessie's house had been sold. Uncle George's store was now the post office. Aunt Helen's house had burnt down and now was a vacant lot. She drove her children to the cemetery where she as a young girl had walked with her grandma so many times to place fresh cut flowers on family graves. At this point, her kids were getting hungry and restless. Place after place they stopped, and memory after memory she shared with them. She got the same reaction. They were hungry and tired and maybe even a little bored. Can we go now? Why did the kids not understand or appreciate the importance of these places and memories? She realized it was because she had not shared it with them. With an aching heart and tear-filled eyes, she drove out of town that day with regret for not sharing these stories, places, and people of what had once been the perfect backdrop for a Norman Rockwell town, now was only a shell of what it had once been. Because of her neglect in sharing the stories, the memory of this place that had lived and breathed through her family for 200 years would die with her. As Kimberly pondered this experience, she thought, what else was dear to her that she hadn't shared, but should? She then had an epiphany about preserving the love of America in the hearts of her children, and how vital our role as a mother is in doing this. How can our future generations ever understand or embrace our history, our heritage, and legacy of liberty that is uniquely American if we don't share it with our children? Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in the United States where men were free. I love this quote. My mama actually had a picture of Ronald Reagan next to Jesus Christ in my childhood home, in the kitchen of all places. For 8 years, I would stare at those pictures as I would eat my morning cereal. There was no doubt in my mind what was most important to my mother: God and country, faith and freedom. Question: what are ways your mother or your grandmother has shared important things with you? And how can you pass down these legacies of love and freedom and faith to your posterity? Freedom is fragile. 200 plus years ago, the battle for freedom was fought with cannons and muskets in open fields and meadows. Today, the battle will be fought with stories and love, nurturing liberty within the walls of our home. We are writing a new chapter in history, a chapter where freedom must prevail. Righteous women in their circle of influence, beginning in their home, can turn the world around. Let's review some questions for discussion now. Number one, how does the work that you do seem invisible at times? And how do we know that that is really not the case? Number two, how does God view us, his choice daughters, in the work that we do? And how does the faith of a mother and a grandmother become the faith of that child? Mama, you and your daughters are like Queen Esther. You have been saved to come to earth at these perilous times when America is at the crossroads. What will you do to save your family and your people and your nation? And four, what are the ways that your mother and grandmother have shared important things with you? And how can you pass down these legacies of family and freedom and faith to your posterity? We have come to the end of our video lesson. May you have a fruitful and inspiring discussion on the materials presented today. If we are to heal our land, we must begin by educating ourselves first. I really want to commend you for gathering in your cottage meetings, taking the time to learn together, to share experiences, and then to go home and plant those seeds in the hearts of your loved ones. For as the woman goes, so goes the nation. Till next time, take care.
I will absolutely love Julian Jackson. I was inspired by her and Colette Fearson in our Sisters of Liberty class where this was all taught. And I believe everything that she testified in this filming of her teaching that lesson. And this chapter that I want to do on Ellis Island, to me, is very similar to what she was just explaining about keeping the stories alive. And if we, there's a lot of incorrect things now out there about the Statue of Liberty, and that's why we studied it last week. And this is just inspiring to me, this Ellis Island and the story of Emma Lazarus. She says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And she was a poet. And we're going to discuss more on her as I talk first about why Ellis Island was so significant to millions of Americans. So coming into the New York harbor below the deck of a ship, my father and I heard this tremendous rumble above us, growing louder and louder. We couldn't identify what the noise was. It was very early in the morning, so we ran out to the deck, and there were people of all denominations, some on their knees making the sign of the cross, Jews in their prayer shawls. And as we were passing this Statue of Liberty, it was the first time I ever saw it. It was a great sight. And this is an immigrant from Poland, Lawrence Meinwald, who was just 6 years old at the time. So just beyond the Statue of Liberty was Ellis Island, the golden door to America. Between 1892 and 1954, over 12 million immigrants came through the doors of Ellis Island, our nation's busiest immigrant inspection station. Over 40% of all Americans can trace their roots to Ellis Island. Immigrants came wearing their native costumes and carried bundles, baskets, trunks, and suitcases containing whatever necessities and precious possessions they could manage. Some traveled alone. Some traveled as families carrying infants with little children in tow. Others traveled as partial families, anxious to finally reunite with loved ones or relatives ready, waiting for them in America. Many came to the strange new land not knowing a soul, not knowing English, and with little money because they had sold everything they owned to pay for passage across the Atlantic to America. It was the golden land of opportunity. Although many immigrants traveled first or second class on sailing ships and later steamers bound for America, many could only afford passage in the steerage section, the lowest level of the ship, where the ship's steering mechanisms were located. Packed like sardines for a 3-week voyage, they had no privacy, little comfort, and poor food. Their typical diet consisted of black bread, boiled potatoes, and watery soup. The stench was horrible, from few toilets and so many unwashed bodies, and they saved the precious water on board for drinking. And then the seasickness affected many of them. Their arrival at Ellis Island was not the end of their troubles. Letters from relatives who had already experienced Ellis Island warned the new arrivals of greedy workers who stole baggage, cheated newcomers at the currency exchange, and charged too much for the train fare. Like the ships, Ellis Island was overcrowded, smelly, noisy from the kafanu. Yes, from all of the languages. The immigrants' worst fear was that of being declined admission to America if the legal inspectors did not receive the proper answers to one of their questions, or if papers were missing, or if during the medical exam the doctors detected a contagious disease such as trachoma, an eye disease, or favus, a difficult to cure scalp disease. The most heart-rending experience is when a family member, especially a child or a parent, was returned to their country of origin because of a disease contracted either before or during their journey. This affected only 2% of the total immigrants, as doctors and medical staff at the Ellis Island Hospital did everything they could to help the affected immigrants recover. So why did they come? Why were they willing to leave their native lands, their native language, their roots, their families, their homes, their culture, and everything they had known to come to America? They came for the opportunity to experience religious and political freedom. From 1818 to 1906, over 258,000 Jews fled to America from Russia to escape religious animosity. And they organized massacres of people of Jewish faith that were supported by the Russian government under Tsar Alexander III. Several thousand political unfortunates from France, Germany, and Italy, and Austria-Hungary fled to America during political revolutions in the mid-1800s. And they came for opportunity to own their own land, 4 million Irish came to America between 1855 and 1920 to escape unfair landowning conditions, which resulted in widespread poverty and destitution. In the Austro-Hungarian Empire, land was divided into such tiny plots that it was impossible for the peasants to sustain themselves, let alone make a living. They continually faced starvation. Land ownership overseas was mostly reserved for the rich and for the rulers. And they came also for the opportunity to work and to prosper. Although many employment opportunities were available in America, many jobs were backbreaking and paid meager wages. However, most immigrants still considered it an incredible opportunity to work hard so they could finally have the freedom to prosper, buy their own homes and land. In addition, uneducated immigrants valued the opportunity to send their children to school, thus breaking the generational chain of illiteracy and poverty. And they came for the opportunity to live in peace. Social unrest, revolutions, and war plagued numerous countries in Europe during the time of Ellis Island, resulting in the destruction of homes, families, and entire villages. Immigrants feared for their lives and for the safety of their families, but America offered freedom and peace. Emma Lazarus talks about how she came about writing this poem. And this is about her life. So Emma's family heritage can be traced back to one of the first Jewish families who immigrated to America in the mid-1600s. She was born in America around 1849. Her family owned a prosperous sugar refinery in New York and was able to provide an excellent education for Emma through private tutors. In the late 1870s, she witnessed a flood of Jewish immigrants from Russia coming to America to escape the horrors of their country's anti-Semitic persecution. Because of her concern for the plight of the Jews and the conditions in which they found themselves at the immigration station in Manhattan before Ellis Island was constructed, Emma became active in Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. In 1883, many American artists, writers, and poets were asked to donate their works to be auctioned off so that proceeds could be used for the construction of the Statue of Liberty's pedestal. Do you remember we talked about how the Pulsever person who had a newspaper in New York was able to get 120,000 little small donations, even from school children, to be able to build the pedestal so that Statue of Liberty could be put up. So she also got involved with her poems. So Emma, who at the age of 16 published her first book of poems, was now 34 years old and a serious poet. When William M. Everett's, head of the American Committee, invited her to write a poem for the auction, she declined as she felt that she could not write a poem suitable to match the magnitude of the message symbolized by liberty. However, possibly because of her experiences providing aid for the Jewish immigrants from Russia, a poem later became to formulate in her mind. Although it was typical for Emma to write and rewrite her poems over and over until they met her meticulous satisfaction, she wrote The New Colossus in one sitting and never felt the need to rewrite the sonnet. So here it is, The New Colossus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome, her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor, the twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pop, she cries with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. So Emma died of cancer 4 years later at the age of 38, and her poem did not become well known until 1903. At that time, a plaque was placed on the wall inside the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty with the New Colossus inscribed on it. It was not until the 1930s that Emma's poem began to win recognition as an American classic. Today, the last lines of this poem are well known and provide inspiration to many around the world. By the 1980s, the Statue of Liberty was in need of major restoration as her interior iron ribs had corroded and half their original thickness, and thousands of rivets were either missing or loose. So pieces of the torch were falling off due to corrosion, and there were numerous other major concerns. Lee Akaka, chairman of the board of Chrysler Corporation, was asked to lead the commission to raise the estimated $230 million needed for the restoration of Liberty, her future maintenance, and her 100th birthday celebration, as well as for the restoration of Ellis Island. As both his parents had entered the United States through Ellis Island, Ikoka had a special interest in Liberty's restoration project and wrote the tribute below to the lady with the torch. The Statue of Liberty was the first American landmark for millions of immigrants who landed at Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954. So she became an enduring symbol of hope to them. And to the 100 million of us who are the children and grandchildren, the lady with the torch remains a symbol of what those people and this country gave to us. And the story isn't over. The Statue of Liberty is being restored, not just as a monument to the past, but also as a challenge for the future. She'll stand stronger and brighter than ever to remind us of what we've been given and what we owe. The Ikokoa in Liberty. That was for the 1980, the 1980 when they got the money together to fix it. So, what is a right? A right is a power or privilege that belongs to a person by law, nature, or tradition. The founders of our country believed that there were certain rights that belong to all mankind, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that come directly and exclusively from the Creator. So that's inalienable sacred rights by God. There are others throughout the world who believe that rights were bestowed upon mankind by whoever ruled, such as a king or an emperor or a dictator or a government authority or a special compact. These leaders often felt justified in taking away the rights of the people. To prevent a leader in America from doing this, the people of the United States established and ratified the US Constitution to ensure everyone's inalienable rights would be protected. And that's why we call it the Standard of Liberty. And it's fitting that we have the Statue of Liberty to be able to represent that as well. So the Bill of Rights, they constitute, later on in chapter 9 of these stories, we're going to go into this in more detail, but the Bill of Rights constitute the first 10 commandments of the United States. And many Americans living during the birth of the Constitution in 1787, it's coming up September 17th, 1787. The Constitution was concerned that, they were concerned that the Constitution did not clearly safeguard certain rights. Therefore, a Bill of Rights listing specific individual rights, such as the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom to keep and bear arms, it was ratified by the people and added to the Constitution effective December 15th, 1781. The mission of the Bill of Rights was to prevent any further disregard or misrepresentation of the unalienable rights of the American people by the government. And so right now we know that they were saying President Trump with the Mar-a-Lago raid said Amendment 4 was being violated. And I'm going to read Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly described the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So he's suing over the Fourth Amendment. His rights were violated under the Bill of Rights. And so the US Constitution contains the rules by which Americans agree to live and govern ourselves. And if we don't read and understand the rules, how can we live and govern ourselves by them? How can we know if our elected leaders are playing by the rules? And if we do not know our rights and understand the rules which safeguard them, how can we prevent our elected leaders from passing laws that weaken and eradicate our rights? So from ignoring or abusing them altogether, which we're seeing right now, right? So without this knowledge and proper understanding of the US Constitution and these Bill of Rights, we can find ourselves forced to submit to the abuses of oppression and tyranny in the future, kind of like we're doing now. So understanding the US Constitution is like understanding the rules to play like a particular sport. Those participating in the sport must understand and agree by these rules of the game in order to play. The same thing right now, we have the new portion of the military, which is the Space Force. They're saying that there needs to be some rules of engagement in space, because space is now where war can be fought, especially in the digital space, which Space Force is over. And so they're trying to get countries to get together and write a constitution or rules of engagement or laws in space. And in this chapter 3, she actually gives the sample citizenship test questions. I know my son signed up for citizenship and government because it's now in Utah a law that they have to take that. So these are great things that you can go over with your kids to see if they've, if they've learned any, if they understand things. And if not, then we need to reteach them. Because if we go back to what Julian said in the video, Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. And I think we're at that point where if we don't teach these principles, then we will not know freedom. So in the 5,000-year leap with the 28 principles of liberty, this number 6 and 7, I decided to put, because we did the first 5 in the first 2 lessons, that we could try to memorize this week. So all men are created equal. And 7, the proper role of government is to protect equal rights, not provide equal things. There's a lot of things that we have that we can talk to our children about at the dinner table, or we can talk with our friends about. But if I know and do testify that things do begin at the home, and it does start with the ladies first. If we educate ourselves, and like I was saying at the very first lesson, I didn't understand that we weren't a democracy, because you keep hearing it in the fake news that we're a democracy, but we are a democratic republic, or we're a constitutional republic. And so when I was up trying to talk to legislators, I didn't have the right vocabulary to speak. So that's what these classes are all about, is to help us understand and know why we have freedom, and what has been passed on by our own ancestors. I know in my own family, we had people come from Europe and from Great Britain. We had people from Scotland, we had people from the Netherlands, from Germany, from even Belgium. My husband's side does have some French, all came here as immigrants. And I am so thankful for the opportunity to be here in America and to have this banner, this heavenly miracle banner of liberty, the Constitution, and that we're able to live currently right now under those things, and hoping that our children and their children's children will be able to pass on these principles of liberty. As I just have 2 left in the home and 3 that are gone, I'm hoping that they'll stand up for liberty. We definitely had an opportunity to do that during COVID, to understand what sovereignty is, or compared to, groupthink. But we have to get used to being disobedient when tyrants are taking away our liberty. And it's okay when things are, when things that are being forced upon us are not correct. We need to be like what happened during the tea tax and the Boston Tea Party. Okay, so we do have some people on, and this is going to be put on a channel, so you can go back and rewatch it if you'd like. And if anybody, let me see here, who's all here. If anybody would like to join in the conversation, please, let me see, how do I close that? Please give us any stories that you have, or anything that you would like to add to our seminar about, ladies first, that we need to be educated, or about these principles of liberty, and making sure that we pass down these stories down to our children.
Hi, Tami, this is Julene.
Hi, Julene.
How are you?
Okay, go ahead, speak again. All right, Julene, can you speak?
Hi. I love Ellis Island and reading it. Yes, it looks like my mute is off. No?
I can hear you, so I'm going to mute my mic to make sure yours works, okay?
Oh shoot, oh, my phone's about. Oh, okay. Oh, and my phone looks like it's got 1 bar left. Darn it all. I was just going to say, I love this lesson today. I love what you shared about Ellis Island and weaving in current events. And it's the beginning of the school year. And so I'm putting together, every year my little family does at home and the ages and the importance of teaching the 5,000-year leap. I love principles 6 and 7. That you spoke about, and so I try every week. I teach one of the twins talking about the debt forgiveness years ago with some of my kids, and is that really the proper role of government?
Oh, that goes along so well right now. That debt forgiveness, right? Is that go along that? Yeah.
Because ultimately. Right. And how ultimately, it really just causes the going to pay it off. And ultimately what the government will do is just pass it on in the form of taxes to the American people. So, how it feels kind of more like a bribe, from the current administration. And so it's each that what is going on, give it a vote. I just want to affirm and to shore these kids up to give them other ways to look at what, will be spun in the classrooms and then their social media feeds. And so I just joy to hear you teach too. You're a great teacher. I'm going to try and hop on as much as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Jolene. I mean, we love to have
Are
you
you
come on
there?
because yes, I can hear. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Jolene?
Dang.
No, you're here. Can you hear me, Jolene? Jolene, can you hear
Yes,
me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, good, because I can hear you. And now because I know you do teach every morning to your little one. It's inspiring me. It inspires me, and it inspires me to know how to talk to my children. You're like my mentor to know how to do this stuff. And so that I can talk about that this week, especially. Mm-hmm. Can you hear me? Are you talking?
No, I just said thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. So, I mean, it definitely exactly what you're saying with what's happening right now, with the debt stuff. And I loved your stories, with your family, and it's inspiring. And so we need to remember to tell our stories, and especially the stories of our ancestors. And including this is the history of the United States, tell the correct stories so that we don't lose those.
So good. Yes.
Has anybody visited the Statue of Liberty in person? I haven't, or Ellis Island in person. I haven't got to go to New York. One day I want to. Or does anyone else have any stories with their families?
Hi.
Hi.
This is Delane, and I just really loved the lesson today so much, as always. And I do have a really quick story. I've been to Ellis Island several times. There's just such an amazing spirit there. It's just incredible. It is just such an amazing place. And you just feel the spirit of these people who really gave up their lives to come to America and how much they love America. I wanted to share a story of one of my friends. He lives here in Bountiful. His name is Jurgen. Can't think of his last name. His last name is Jurgen. And he is from Germany. And when he was 5 years old, well, when he was really a baby, his dad was a drunk and his dad abandoned the family and left him and his mom. So he was raised by a single mom. And then during World War II, his mother's sister ended up marrying an American soldier. And so she immigrated to America. And so when they were here in America, he was living in just destitute poverty. They were living really a mud floor. It was just terrible conditions. They didn't have enough food to eat. It was horrible. And his mom's sister that lived in America said, come to America. If you can save enough money to get your trip over here, you can live with us and we'll sponsor you and you can come here and live. And so they both saved their money and worked up, both sisters. And she was able to get enough money for herself and for her son. And he said when they arrived in America, his mom just knelt down, sorry, and just kissed the ground. And he said, because of this opportunity we had to come to America, he said, we lived with her sister for a little while, for several months. My mom was able to get a job and we were able to live as middle income people in a very short period of time, less than 2 years. And he said, and then he was able to own his own business. He started his own business. He had 25 employees. And he was able to give 25 people and their families a way to make a living and to live prosperous lives. And so I just love that story because he puts everything in perspective at a time when people don't appreciate what they have here because they really don't understand what it is like to live somewhere else.
Well,
Thank you.
Beautiful. No, that is a beautiful story. Oh, wow. I mean, that's it. If we don't tell these stories of what the sacrifice they made to come over here and then the freedom that they actually felt when they got here and the hard work that they did to be able to prosper, but under this banner, that I noticed this week at the top of the 5,000 year leap, it actually says a miracle that changed the world. It is a miracle, this standard of liberty with the Constitution, and it just does remind me, my middle name is Lena, and it's after my grandma Magdalena Koyman from the Netherlands. And she too, she worked her way over here. And then when she got here, she, washed floors and, at different businesses, she'd go at night and do that. And then she took in laundry so that she could get her brother here. And then she got her next sibling, and then she got her parents here. And, was started to raise a family. And the interesting thing about that is that they became so prosperous. They ended up being able to buy a farm here in Utah. But when the first Model T came out, I was reading their journal. They got a Model T, and they would use this little car on Sunday drives, and they were able to provide work too with their farm and sell their food and then but then all of a sudden something happened, and that was property tax. And she writes in her journal that they never could drive that Model T again, and that they quickly had to sell the property because they couldn't afford to keep their family fed and employees fed, work, salaries and pay for property tax. It just destroyed them. And it's sad what can happen too when we start to allow things that aren't constitutional to come in,
So true.
Yeah.
Unconstitutional.
Yep. And so we definitely need to get working on telling these stories. And I'm inspired by them all. Thank you. I'm so inspired by you women, both of you, that the numerous things that you're doing out there to help preserve liberty, and also to and I know that one principle in the very first lesson that Jillian, that you had taught, that you said, let's pray about how the Lord can use you and what you can do, whether it's just starting in your own home with devotionals, and and I loved how you said we need to be teaching the gospel of liberty at the same time as the gospel of Jesus Christ, because where there is no liberty, they can't do that, right? It can't spread. And so I've been recently doing like word searches for liberty and freedom and that in my scriptures, and studying scriptures about that, just so that my kids can understand and be grateful for, that they have this religious liberty to be able to, worship the way that we choose to worship, right? So
Exactly.
yeah. So next week is the lesson is called Foundations of Faith. And we'll start with those 3 pillars that I was talking about that Julian introduced in the second one. I don't know if her phone died or not, but let's see the 3 pillars of faith so I don't mess them up. So, because I know it's faith, virtue. Where's my 3 pillars of faith? Because I don't want to mess up.
The power of patriotism.
The power of patriotism. There we go. So we can raise patriots. Yeah. So, but we'll be talking about faith next week. And boy, if we exercise faith in miracles, like I just literally this last week noticed that it says a miracle that changed the world is the title of the 5,000-year leap book, which is, all about the principles in the Constitution. So I think that's cool. Let's have faith in miracles and let's pray for miracles to happen to maintain our liberty, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And I don't know why my Zoom is doing something that it says a meeting's already in progress. So I'm going to try to get my tech kid to help me fix that for next week. And then Nancy, are you on? I think I heard your voice. Is Nancy on? Maybe it wasn't Nancy. Because Nancy is going to have a Faith and Freedom channel, and she's going to place all of these videos on there. I think on her YouTube under Latter Day Media. Maybe it will just be separate, and then also on her Venmo. And then I was going to put do a Utah County or Moms for America on Rumble. But we'll get these up so that if people are looking for resources to help inspire them or to help teach their own kids. I heard a really big, it used to be like, I know when I started homeschooling and gosh, probably 1998 is when I started homeschooling my kids. It was very, very few of us, right? And now it's like moved up to 20% are pulling their kids out because of what's being shared and the indoctrination that's happening. And so I know more and more, moms are going to be looking for, things to help supplement teaching about liberty and the Constitution and looking to God, not the government. So hopefully this will be a good resource to put out there and people can find on their own, right, as well. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Tami. You are an excellent teacher. This was so good. Oh my word, honey. You are off to the races, girlfriend.
Well, no, I'm learning from you. I'm like, I need to memorize this stuff. I have all these, I do carry a whole bunch of these bookmarks with the 28 principles. And when I'm talking to people, if they seem open, I give them a bookmark so that they can learn too. And I'm trying to memorize them like you. So thank you for your examples, you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.